All righty. Let me get my music queued up. Oh, music fail. One day I'm gonna figure this out. But not today. No music today. It's not. All right, now let me see the dance move. Jared, where's your dance move? Come on. You went to Georgia. You know how to dance. Okay. Sorry about the audio fail there. We're gonna make up for it with a great Profit Power Hour today. Welcome, Profit Power Hour Season 5, Episode number 4, The Churn Tax. How client turnover impacts the value of your property management company. We are going to talk all things churn with our superstar rock star panel today. My name is Brad Johnson. I am the CEO of Profit Coach, which is a company that helps property management company entrepreneurs like yourself achieve entrepreneurial freedom by building highly profitable, self-managing PM companies. These are my lovely children. As I am announced in the last Profit Power Hour, I got a fourth one on the way. But here's our Easter pick for your cute pick of the month of my kids. Okay, David, Barrett, Emma. Next one's going to be a boy. All right. Speaking of boys, we got three of them today. All three of these guys are friends of mine, and all three of these guys have 10% or less trailing 12 churn rates, which is pretty elite. And so I wanted to bring them on to talk a little bit more about how they did that and what their operations look like. I will let them introduce themselves in a moment, but for now, I'll give you their names. Steve Simpson, owner of Central Florida Property Management in Orlando. Jared Cordova, owner of Real Estate Management Associates in the greater Atlanta area. He can tell you a little bit more about where exactly he manages. And Robert Dell'Osso, president of MasterKey Property Management in the Raleigh-Durham area. And to that I say, go pack. All right, if you have any questions, drop them in the Q&A box and we will make sure we get to them. As always, please feel free to light up the chat with your questions for panelists, your comments, your thoughts, your complaints, things that you think we could do better next time. Please leave it all out there for us. Here's your agenda. So 3 main sections today. Let's talk a little bit, not too much math, a little bit of math, but how does the math work behind a compounding portfolio? Why does churn actually matter so much when it comes to enterprise value, revenue, profitability, things like that? Number 2, when is churn actually healthy for the business? I think there is definitely a category of churn called healthy churn. And then number 3, what operational decisions increase long-term client retention? So let's end with some actionable items. What can you do to reduce churn in your business? Okay, first, we're going to put a poll up. Katie, go ahead and put this poll up. What is your current churn rate? I would love to know. Is it less than 10%, 10 to 15%, 16 to 20%, more than 20%, or I don't even measure it? You can put in the chat there how you measure your churn. When I talk about churn, I'm using a trailing 12 metric. So the average over the last 12 months, each month you get a new number. The month from 13 months ago then drops off, and you have this rolling 12 churn metric. You can put in the chat if you'd like how you measure churn, how you track churn. I know that some people do it a little bit differently. Peter Lemons put out a slightly different metric on a 3-month trailing 12. Whatever it is, I want to know what your churn rate is so that we have a good idea here as far as what we're working with, how much of a problem this is or is not for folks. All right. While you are filling out that poll, I will have these guys introduce themselves. Let's start with you, Steve.
Cool. Yeah. Steve Simpson out of the Orlando area, broker owner of Central Florida Property Management. What sort of stuff do you want to know? Just our size, our structure?
Yeah, tell me a little bit about size of your company, structure, how long you've been in business, what you focus on, that sort of stuff.
Cool. Yeah. So we got started in 2010, got serious in like 2014. We manage about just under 1,100 doors now. We've got 13 local staff, 7 remote. Pretty much all residential properties. So I think we're 60% single family, 30% townhomes and condos, and about 10% small multifamily. I think our biggest building is like 8 units, so nothing super crazy.
Okay, so definitely a single family focused company.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Jared, how about you, sir?
Hey everybody, Jared Cordova. We're with RMA. I am actually in a smaller town, South Atlanta market known as Griffin, Georgia, and the immediate surrounding areas. Been in business since we've been doing property management since 2005. Joined into RMA in 2007. Helped grow the company over the years, even through the economic downturn, with a partner. And then in 2022, I bought him out. And since then, I've kind of been on a mission to kind of retool and upgrade and rebrand the company. It's been quite a ride. We are currently a hybrid style structure. We manage about 630 doors, have been as high as 750. Have been trying to kind of nip and tuck some here and there over the last 2 years and add key doors that we want. Been doing well with that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Excited to be here. Thank you so much, Brad.
Yeah, man. How many doors did you say you have right now?
Oh, 600. I'm sorry. Yeah, 630 right now.
Okay.
So
All in the Griffin area.
no, well, yeah, and in the Griffin surrounding area, pretty much
Okay.
within about a 30, 40-mile radius tops on the compass
Okay.
point.
Okay. Very good. Robert.
Yeah, thanks, Robert Dell'Osso, MasterKey Property Management, as mentioned in the Raleigh-Durham area. I won't say go Pack, but I'll say go Gators because that's my allegiance. We manage around 530 or so doors at last count, scattered site, single family stuff, a few small multifamily, triplexes, duplexes, one fourplex, couple of small commercial units. We have a local team of a couple of assistant property managers, myself, my wife, who's my COO, CMO. Our BDM is local, and then about 6 remote team members, 6 or 7. We'll take on a couple of summer interns local this summer to help with the heavy lift of the summer season. But that's pretty much how our team's built out right now.
Nice. Yes, you're a topic for another day, but your summer intern program is super smart, and I'm surprised that more people don't do that to bring in to help with the influx of work. But a different topic for another day. Okay, I'm going to end this poll, and I'm going to show you the results. So, churn rate. Many of you, half of you, say less than 10%. I don't know about that. I hope that's true. I hope that's true. My data, our internal data says that that's unlikely that half of you are less than 10%, but maybe you are. Kind of depends on how you're measuring it, is kind of what I was referring to earlier. But let's just say it's true. Half of you less than 10% churn. That's really fantastic. 10 to 15%, 16 to 20%. Todd agrees with me in the chat, if you haven't noticed. More than 20%, 3 of you. I don't even measure it, 2 of you. That's great. The fact that only 2 out of these 50 who responded, 4%, say that they don't measure their churn. That's really good that number is that small. I would guess a few years ago that was not the case. But there's been a lot of awareness that's been brought to the industry on churn and the importance of churn, a lot of which we're going to cover today just to make sure everybody understands how big of a deal this is. You definitely should be tracking churn. It's right up there with labor efficiency, revenue per unit, in terms of things that really matter in driving profitability in your business. Yes, Karen, your PC dashboard is accurate. So 11.8%, that's nice. Really good stuff. And John, we are actually under 10% because we don't charge enough or make money yet. Another way to keep churn down is to charge no fees. But it's another way to not make money. So, all right, let's get into it, folks. The math behind a compounding portfolio. I have some interesting data for you here. First of its kind. This is a correlation between churn percentage in brackets and profit percentage, as well as a little bit of DLER talk in here. So what you are seeing is that in our data set, which is pretty representative of the industry, we have people all over the map in terms of sizes and geographies, profitability journeys. A lot of our client base are newer folks to us, and so they're not yet profitable. Our long-term clients, obviously, very profitable. That's the whole point of what we do. But what you're looking at here is that there's an optimal churn rate amongst our data set, and it's 10 to 15%. And these are our takeaways on this, which is, okay, if your churn rate is too high, 15, 20, 25%, you're spending a lot more on sales and marketing and labor to replace all of those lost clients. That part's pretty obvious. What I think can be less obvious and can sometimes be true is if your churn rate is extremely low, you might have lower profitability because you are spending so much money on keeping your churn rate super low. You have a very, very high touch model, requires a lot of extra labor, and can be good for the churn rate. And maybe you're optimized for that churn rate for a specific reason, but it can really eat into profitability because, as everybody who attends this webinar likely knows, the number one expense line item for property management companies is direct labor. And it takes a lot of direct labor to have a super high touch customer service model. Okay, so there's some data for you. And then I referenced Peter a minute ago. One of the things that Peter did that I really liked was a couple years ago, he created this churn calculator. This is just a screenshot of some numbers that I put in here that are around averages in the industry, averages and an average RPU, average unit churn rate, kind of the average company at 300 units. And this is a really good visualizer of the effects of churn. So I would go to this if you have not done this, put in your units, put in how many units you get on average per month. Look at the last 12 months, add them all up, divide by 12. Put in your churn rate. If you don't know how to calculate that, download the NARPM Financial Performance Guide, the metrics guide, do the calculation, or email me and I'll help you. Find your churn rate, find your revenue per unit, and play around with this and see what happens when you raise and lower your churn rate. What you'll find, if you aren't aware already, is that there is a maximum amount of units, a theoretical maximum, an actual maximum, actually, it's not theoretical, of units that you can have in your business based on your churn rate. Because one thing has to change. Either you have to increase how many doors you bring in per month, we're going to hold that constant for now, or you have to lower your churn rate to continue to grow. So in this instance, if you have 300 units and you bring in 10 per month and you have a 15% annual unit churn rate, you cannot possibly have more than 683 units under management. It won't work because you're going to hit there and you're going to even out as far as your churn rate and your units that come in. You have to do one or the other, lower the churn rate, increase the units per month. And then you also max out, of course, if you max out on units, you're going to max out on revenue. So your potential is capped by your churn rate. John, I will throw that link in the chat here in just a minute. So know that your growth potential is controlled by your churn rate. Okay, so I want to take that context, the importance of churn, the math behind it, the difference between a 5, 10, 15% churn rate and what that can mean for the maximum ability for your business to grow. And now bring in our panelists and get going on questions that will reveal how they manage their churn, how they keep it low, and the things that they're doing. Because these guys are running profitable businesses with a churn rate that's 10% or less. So they're actually even below that threshold of 10 to 15%. So would be great to hear from them. So Steve, I want to start with you. Where does your team invest more time and energy in winning new doors or keeping the doors that you already have? How do you guys think about those two different business activities?
Yeah, I think we definitely spend more time acquiring doors than we do trying to keep existing doors. And I think I've always just thought from when I started, it's a lot cheaper and easier to keep existing doors than it is to add new doors. It just takes, basically as long as you're delivering good service and people aren't leaving, it's a lot easier than chasing down new doors and what have you. But I guess the key there probably is delivering good service. I imagine we'll get to it later, but I think the buckets you guys use for churn, where it's like good, bad, or neutral, is super helpful. And the way I've always thought about it is basically you really can't control neutral churn. There's just too many things out of your control, people's lives, the market, so on and so forth. So I try to not even really look at that. I'm mostly focusing on reducing bad churn as low as possible, and then if possible, getting maximizing good churn. Did I say that right? Yeah, reducing bad churn, maximizing good churn.
Yeah.
So yeah, from what I've experienced, the easiest way to reduce bad churn is just to provide good service, which I know sounds like very overly broad, but I think that's, if your company is operating to provide a good service where your customers are happy, in theory they shouldn't leave, which gives you then time to focus on adding new doors, which brings in more revenue and so on and so forth. So that's the way we've kind of always thought about the whole doors in and doors out deal.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. Robert, how about you? How do you guys think through the new business development activities in relation to the, let's call them retention activities? And do you have specific retention type activities that your team is focused on?
I don't think we have specific retention activities, but it's more that we've trained our team members to be very transparent with our owners. So we believe in transparency, to own issues. If an issue arises, and we did something wrong, let's own it, right? And pick up the phone and call the owner. I will routinely pick up the phone and call the owner. And I think that goes a long way in making what is probably just a minor issue stay a minor issue and not letting it become a major issue where they think about they want to go to a different property management company. So if you communicate well and you're transparent, you're not afraid to own issues, that really helps a lot, because I don't think anybody expects us or our team members to be perfect, but if we're doing things and do what we say we're going to do and stick to it, and if we make a mistake, we own that mistake and tell them, hey, we made a mistake and here's how we're going to fix it. That just goes a long way, and then from the acquiring the new doors, we do have a dedicated BDM, so there's its own budget for that, and it's separate. It's not I don't look at it as, hey, I got to pull money from one bucket to the other. They have their budget, they have their tasks and their management structure. The BDM reports directly into our CMO, COO, and they run that organization, and that helps just steadily get clients in on a regular basis.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. We'll talk more about that in a bit, because I think one of the best ways to reduce churn is to have a more discerning filter for who you bring into your organization in the first place, as far as doors go. But we'll get there. Oh, here we go. This is from Cheryl, the COO of MasterKey. One small retention plan we have at MasterKey, our owner newsletter that reports on the local rental industry and how we are preparing for what is happening, proactive and not reactive. That's really good. That's super, super helpful to get that in front of people, give them context, help them understand, what's going on in the rental market, so that when they get the renewal notice from from a tenant, or excuse me, from a property that you're going to renew a tenant in, and they're like, hey, the market doesn't support a 5% increase like it did a few years ago. They're not shocked by that. They've been getting that steady drip of, here's how things have changed. So that's a really good one. Jared, how about you guys? How do you think through biz dev versus retention?
We're probably definitely more focused on kind of keeping what we have, whether, rather than adding new doors. And I mean, gosh, both these guys took a couple of my points. Robert, I couldn't agree more. The number one way to reduce churn over time with us has been lack of communication with other people's managers. If you communicate, and what's just as important is how quickly you communicate, clients want to hear back quickly. If you get back to them right away, you can put out a fire before it gets big. And I completely agree with you. Just owning your mistakes. If something didn't go on plan A, which in property management, it often doesn't, just letting them know that you're aware of it, you're on top of it, what you plan to do with it. And even if you drop the ball, how you plan to pick it back up again. And 9 times out of 10, that'll smooth over anything. But one caveat I would add when you're attacking churn is know your market. Because in my opinion, those of you in much larger urban markets, there's probably a different pathway to attack it than some of us that are in smaller markets. Like, for instance, with me, one of the reasons we've had as little churn as we've had, particularly years and years ago, is because we didn't have a tremendous amount of competition in our local area, in our local market, which that's great. But that also means that it's much more of a zero-sum game. So it behooves one to hold your doors, a whole lot more than it does to just rely on that sheer number of people who are just going to be turning over no matter what, just because of sheer options. So for us, it's been better to maybe go the extra mile and concede here and there when we otherwise might not would have, or maybe someone in a larger market wouldn't, just because it makes sense to keep the relationship and retain our presence. And once you have that presence in a smaller market, you're going to attract new doors organically without even necessarily having to try to go get them as hard. And that's been real good for us as well. We haven't necessarily had to fight churn as hard, nor have we had to chase doors as hard, predominantly because we know our market and we know how to play that game and keep our reputation up as best we can and not fight it from that side.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. And obviously, if you're in a larger market, the same thing holds true. Know who you're up against, know what your competitive edge is, know what your unique value proposition is, and sell to that, not to, everyone who might walk through your virtual door. So yeah, that's good. Okay. So this is just a question to kind of get in your head a bit. When you think about effort and revenue, how many years does an owner need to stay for that relationship to really pay off? Like what sort of relationship are you looking for? I know that's kind of a funny question. I'm not talking about dating profiles here, but what are you looking for from an owner when you're screening them to see how long they're going to stay and whether or not that's a good fit for you? So Robert, I'll start with you on this. What comes to your mind when you think of that?
Yeah, one of the things we try to feel them out for is how well are they how receptive are they when we bring up maintenance? Because in the sales cycle, you should talk about maintenance of a property. They may not have any idea because they've never rented a house out, the types of things that they're expected to maintain, right? As well as what you can and cannot deduct for a security deposit, those types of things. So setting those expectations early on. Our BDM has the power. They're fully empowered. If they don't feel this person's a right fit, they can tell them that and move on. Because I'd rather have an owner that follows our principles around maintenance. We're big on maintenance because maintenance directly correlates to tenant satisfaction and tenant renewal rates and less vacancy time, right? So maintenance is super important, being responsive to it, doing it properly, good quality. That's a huge factor. So if I get the sense or she gets the sense that, hey, they don't want to spend a dime on this place, or this place was built in 1983 and has never been updated and they don't have any budget to do anything, but they want a premium price, let's not sign the door for the sake of signing the doors, because we're never going to get it rented and then what they want. And then it's going to be an angry owner relationships from the start, and there is a high likelihood they'll churn. So I'd rather have an owner that has the same philosophies around managing rental properties that we do. And then we find those stay for several years, and it's a good, healthy relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Jared, how about you? What do you think? How do you think through this lens of how long somebody needs to stay for it to be worth it for you?
Varies on the property, and for different reasons. I mean, if you're talking about a C-class property, it may be a little more profitable sooner because it's likely you're going to done more maintenance. It might have turned quicker, more opportunities along the way for revenue generating activities. I mean, all things being equal, off the top of my head, I'd like to think that if you've kept a client 3 years or more, it's probably started to get pretty good, because at that point in time, you've either A, kept one tenant all that time, which hopefully there hasn't been a whole lot of interaction or management intensiveness with that tenant. So you've made your fees. If not, you may have turned it once. So you likely made some fees there. If you do maintenance, you had a turnover, which you probably did get decently on there. So, I would think, 2.5, 3 years is where it starts to get really good. You keep a client for 4 or 5 years, it's really, really good. 1 year can just depend on the house, the client, and the circumstance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Steve, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with a lot with what Jared said. There's just tons of nuance to it. For us, we do sales. I'm not sure if you guys do sales, but obviously, if we're selling the property, if that's the exit, that totally changes how long I care for the property stays with, right? I've always had in my mind 3 years is like the kind of, what I'm shooting for. But obviously, a property that doesn't turn in 3 years is a lot better than one that turns 3 times in 3 years in terms of, the time spent to manage it. I think in terms of how's the property coming in, so if a realtor is referring it, that eliminates the potential that we're going to sell it, which makes like the overall lifetime value of the client go down. So in other words, if a realtor is referring the property, I want it to stay longer than one that it's not being referred, because at least we can pick up the sale potentially of the ones not referred. Yeah, I mean, I think 3 years sounds right. I don't have like a super hardcore math reason for that, but it seems like you make enough revenue over 3 years to kind of justify the onboarding costs and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and typically, in my experience, when you have somebody, unless their express goal is, I'm an investor, this is a 5-year hold, and then a sale, or I'm a 1031 guy, and so I'm just going to keep churning through properties, working my way up. If they do make it 3 or 4 years, they tend to stay longer. And Catherine is making the point that I'm exactly about to make, which is if you have a 10% churn, your average unit stays with you a decade. So even though you guys are shooting for 3 years and you're thinking in terms of like, this is what it would be worth it, you're actually doing something in your operations that's causing people to stay much, much longer. So that's the math behind churn, right? It's just the inverse. So a 20% churn rate means the average unit stays with you for 5 years. A 15% means the average unit stays with you about 7 years. And a 10% churn rate means the average unit stays in your portfolio for roughly 10 years. And that's the crazy part about churn and how it affects enterprise value. It's so predictive, as long as things stay the same, of future revenue because of your historical past and the churn rate and how long that means units will stay. Steve, were you going to say something there? Okay.
I'll jump in. I got one quick comment.
Yeah.
That's where I like small acquisitions. And we did one last year. It was a couple dozen doors. They tend to already be occupied, right? So you start recognizing the revenue right away. And with the smaller acquisitions, you can, in a lot of cases, get them for like a 1x, right? Like 1 year's annual revenue. So after that first year, they're, profitable, right? So to speak. And they typically aren't churning because the smaller acquisitions may be coming from somebody who did real estate or property management as a side hustle from their real estate work. So they weren't really, call it expert property managers. So now we're giving these owners a lot more communication, a lot more visibility into their properties. They've got reports from our property management software. They can run reports ad hoc, et cetera. And I get comments from these owners regularly, from the last one even, that says, wow, I had no idea that any of this ever was taking place for my property. All I got before was a monthly deposit, and they sometimes reach out if there was maintenance. And so, and add in periodic inspections, et cetera, stuff like that. And so those smaller versus the bigger acquisitions, I believe, can lead to quicker profitability in properties.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, typically referred to as tuck-in acquisitions. If somebody only had 25, 50 properties, there's a decent chance it was a side hustle. They weren't paying super close attention. They weren't giving great service. You can bring them into your high-level customer service organization and really wow people as long as you can get them to give you a chance, which it sounds like you've been able to do that. A couple things in the chat here that I think are worth talking about. Todd said, I charge an onboarding fee for properties that already have a tenant in place since we aren't getting the leasing fee, but not for others. That makes a ton of sense. You have to onboard that tenant. Maybe you have to get them on your lease. You have to transfer their funds. You have to do things for those tenants. It makes sense to compensate yourself for that. Obviously, if there's not a tenant, you're going to get a leasing fee. If you're not charging leasing fees, totally different conversation. Tal, this is also a very good point, and this is Tal's business model. For those of you who don't know, he said, while we want longer term owners, we don't care if they say up front it'll only be a year or two. Our RPU is high enough to always say yes. So, as we've talked about many times in this program, to run a profitable, successful business, you do not have to max out every single benchmark. You can run a high, and I'm not saying that Tal's churn is high, but you can run a high churn, high RPU business and make a lot of money. And that conversation really changes then who you might be willing to take, because you can make enough money in a 2 or 3 year cycle that It makes total sense for you to take them, even though you know they're not going to stay very long. So that's one of my favorite parts about property management is all the different ways you can do it and still win. There's not a one size fits all business model here. All right, moving on. How does churn impact the long-term value of a property management company? Talked about this a little bit, but I want your thoughts, especially for PMC owners thinking about an eventual exit. So I don't know if any of the three of you are in the exit conversation or thinking about when that might occur. But how do you think through churn and long-term value of your company? Jared, I'll start with you on this if you've got something here.
Well, I mean, my first thought is stability is always good. No matter what you're evaluating, be it profitability, be it health of the business, be it reputation, customer service. I mean, a low churn rate is more often than not just going to project a well-running, stable company that is effective in its marketplace. I mean, I'm certainly not in any interest to sell in the near future or even on the horizon. But I mean, I would think a historical reduced churn rate would definitely help you justify, a higher multiple when you want to sell your company. Could help you avoid a lot more of the clawbacks or some of the other things if you can just show that over time you've built a brand with real goodwill and real presence in the marketplace. So, call it reputation, call it street cred, call it whatever you want to call it, but it can't hurt you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. Steve or Robert, anything on this?
Yeah, I agree with Jared in terms of just kind of a intangible, I guess tangible, but also intangible. Like it's kind of a proof of pudding that you're running a well operating machine. The other side of it is just obviously if your churn rate goes down and you continue to add doors, your revenue is going to keep going up, right? Like you can think of a door not lost as basically a door added versus if it was lost. So if you're getting valued on a revenue multiple, the more revenue you have, the more valuable the company is going to be. So kind of like I said to begin with, I think it's a lot easier to keep clients than to get new ones. So the ROI from a enterprise value perspective, I think is higher on having a low churn versus maybe a high conversion rate or a lot of leads or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Robert, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I mean, pretty much the same. Long-term clients show stability of your company. It's good for if you're going to sell, for marketing the company. And you probably won't experience much clawback if you sell to one of the big firms or even a local larger firm, because you just won't turn over many. The largest acquisition I did was 125 doors, which I know isn't huge in the grand scheme of things, but we didn't have to claw back any. They were all long-term owners. So that was really good. And we just picked it up and ran from there and tried to do an even better job. So no near-term horizons to sell. So it's not too much of a concern, but long-term, yeah. Of course, unless somebody comes to me with like a 4 or 5x multiple that Todd predicts is going to happen soon.
Yeah, no one's for sale until the right offer comes, and then all of a sudden everybody's for sale.
Right.
That's usually how that goes. Yeah, a couple comments on this. The first one is there is no such thing as a standard multiple in property management company sales. I've looked at a lot of data on this. The range varies widely. It varies even by the acquirer. There is, yeah, I'm just looking at the chat. There is different acquirers pay different amounts, and different acquirers pay the same acquirer will pay a different amount for different companies, different multiples. And so there's a lot of room for negotiation in these deals. Don't ever, this, no one in this room would be here unless they knew this, but you don't just take the first offer that you get. You go and you look at your churn and you say, hey, I have a 10% churn rate. I have a 12% churn rate. There is a level of consistency and stability in this portfolio that makes this company worth a lot more than the offer that you gave me, because you can look at years of performance at this level and reliably predict your revenue forecast based on that. So I think there's that. And then the other one is it's also churn gives you a nice marketing tool if you're willing to use it. So you guys, I mean, with less than 10 years, 10% or less, you can go out to the market and say, hey, my average client stays with me 10 years. You don't have to stay with me 10 years, but when we're talking about customer service, like what relationship have you had that has lasted a decade or long? What business relationship have you had that has lasted a decade or longer? Most people, maybe it's just a handful because something happens and you leave or it's transactional. There's nothing transactional about a 10-year business relationship. And that's your average is 10 years. So, and then of course you can pull up the benchmarks guide from us and say, we're in the top quartile. We're the best of the best. Our churn rate is super low. So that's just a marketing point there too. All right, as the basic otter plans file out here, we will move on to our second category, which is healthy versus harmful churn. Okay, we're going to put another poll up. I want to know from you which feels more true for your business today. Where are you growing your profits? Are your profits coming mostly from adding new doors, kind of the traditional way to think about growth in your business? Or are you actually growing your profits more from keeping existing doors? Jared, I would say you're probably in that category of people who are focused on retention and you're driving profitability actually through retention. I think most of you will probably land in this mix of both, but file yourself in there. Tell me where you identify with what feels more true. Maybe you have an actual number that tells you what's true, but at least what feels true for you, I'm curious. So as that's going through, I will move on to our next question here, which is, can retention efforts become unprofitable? And when does that happen? Jared, I want to start with you since I know retention is big on your mind. Can retention efforts be an unprofitable venture? Can you go too far in trying to withhold and maintain your units?
Oh, I'm sure you can. And my answer to that would be is that I have to put a pencil to it, and I probably have. For me, I think I like to assume that pretty much all, if I've taken the business in the first place and I've kept the business for the right reasons, it's probably worth keeping unless there are the wrong reasons to keep it. Maybe the client becomes unreasonable. Maybe there's just some other situation. And I think your pushback is going to start happening there more along the lines that I'm sitting down on a spreadsheet and I'm looking at a list of all my clients and their fee percentages and what their RPU is, and I'm going to start line item vetoing clients just because their RPU doesn't match my other RPU people. I mean, why are you going to do that? You're going to stop trying to retain clients for other reasons, typically first. And oftentimes, some of your least profitable properties are going to be the ones that are going to leave you anyway for some other reason. At least that's been my experience. Better to let that happen than to, go off and start firing everybody.
Yeah, no doubt. Steve, how about you?
Yeah, I think there's a ton of stuff that kind of goes into this question. Obviously, one would be the RPU of the property, and the way I look at it is the RPU relative to our average property. So obviously, if they're below average, they're kind of pulling our average down, and I want the average up. So that's something to consider. Another one, obviously, is the time spent. I don't yet have a great way of measuring like time spent per property, but I can talk to our team and get a decent sense of, is this property, and usually the owner, let's be honest, taking up more time than like the average property. And obviously, if both it's less profitable and there's more time spent, that's not good. So that's not one really worth saving. Other things I think about is property type, and that kind of goes into the time spent on the property. Like, for example, we have a decent amount of condos, and condos have gotten, there's a lot of stuff involved with them in terms of like the rules you got to jump through and the showing them with all the gates and the garages and all this sort of stuff. It just turns into like, it just seems like a pain in the, what, is it really worth kind of doing it? And then sometimes when you're going through expansion, I think about kind of like the number of doors each of my managers is handling. And if it's low, we need to get it up, then maybe I keep on a property I otherwise wouldn't, because it's just like, all right, well, yeah, they're not making us this much money, and they're taking up more time than we would like. But for the time being, we've got all this capacity, so may as well fill it. And once it gets filled, then we'll kind of go back at the end and kind of trim the fat a little bit. So I know you've talked about this in other profit power hours about trying to like look at your kind of grade all of your clients and maybe cutting them every so often. We do that, probably on a biannual or every 2-year basis. So yeah, I think there's other parts too, in terms of is this door worth saving or not? Like one also would be, do we think they're going to sell in the near future? Have they indicated that at all? Are they consistently bringing on more doors? Are the doors they're bringing on in locations that we kind of need to balance ourselves out with, so we're not too congested in one area? There's a lot of things to consider. I would say the time spent and the money are probably the number one and two, and also probably, I guess again, it kind of goes along with time spent, but if the owner's just a jerk, like life's too short. And I think about that with our staff too. My staff have thanked me on numerous occasions, like, because they'll just come in and they'll say, hey, this guy, like this is this is kind of embarrassing. True story. We fired an owner who was in my wedding. She was my wife's one of her bridesmaids, but she was just horrible to my staff. And after I moved her around two or three people, I'm like, all right, I talked to my wife. I'm like, listen, it's kind of awkward, but I got to fire Alex. And because this life's too short, it's just I don't want my team to think that I don't care how they're being treated. So that's not really a money decision, but it's just like a big picture, long term decision. So kind of a lot there, but yeah.
No, that's really good. I mean, one of the best ways you can show your team you care for them and you have their back is to fire a bad owner so that they don't have to deal with them anymore. Sometimes they're just complaining and you need to get underneath the complaint and realize that there's some give and take there. But sometimes it's just this person is a bad fit for our company. I took them on because they were my wife's friend and they just need to go because they're bad for the company. That's really good. And then something else you mentioned brought up just this thing that I've been thinking about a lot that I just asked Todd to do, but he's away from his computer. There he is. Automatic time tracking per property. So if I think AI can solve this, because between using phone locations for inspections and driving around to different places and seeing, not just recording, but actually seeing what you're doing on your computer, who you're what file you're messing with in AppFolio or Lead Simple or whatever. I think that's like the next big unlock to labor efficiency and property management, and actually saying, right now we do a good job on the revenue side. How much revenue per unit does this unit bring in for me? But what we don't have is, other than very approximate estimations, how much money do I spend on this unit every month? That could make things very obvious very fast in terms of, can retention efforts become unprofitable? Well, when you add it all up, I'm actually losing money on this property and they want to leave. Okay, great. See you later, because we're in the red on this particular property. And then you can segment, I know I'm going off here, but I'm passionate about this stuff. Then you can segment your top quartile in terms of your profitability per unit and figure out, what is it about them? Is it the location? Is it the owner? Is it temperament? Whatever it is, what can you do to maximize how many of those people you have and have a higher profit per unit as a company? So I'll step off my soapbox, hand it over to Robert. How about you guys? Any thoughts on retention efforts becoming unprofitable?
Yeah. So, a lot of strategies that property managers will use is, you have some issue with an owner and, something went sideways, whatever, maybe it was your fault, maybe it wasn't. To smooth it over, you waive a month's management fees, right? We've probably all done it. But the problem becomes is then if the owner feels that they can find every little issue or come up with an issue and they start asking for that every month. So, I'll do it once, but that's it really, in a year basically. But if it becomes a habit, I'm picking up the phone and having a call with the owner and saying, hey, what's going on? Because, we can't seem to do anything right by you. So what do you need us to do? And if we can do that, great. If not, then the answer might be, you may want to find another management company who's better suited for your needs, which is okay to say. People are afraid to say it. I talk to other PMs all the time where they say, oh yeah, I really wish I could afford to lose an owner, but I just can't. I'm like, you can't afford to lose one owner? And on that one owner, are you spending 80% of your time on? I'll cut them loose, right? Especially if it's like Steve and Jared mentioned, is this a lower rent property, but it's more high touch, whether it's with the owner, the tenants, and the maintenance? Is this house 60 years old and it pulls $1,200 a month and you're only getting 5 or 6% or something really low like that? So every time there's maintenance, it's not easy, it's more involved. That's just not going to be a profitable house for you, and it's time to let those go. And I understand you want to take when you're first starting out, you take on everything you can, right? We've all done it. You don't turn anyone away. Then it's time to cycle some of those out over time because your company has matured more. You've got a lot more experience. You've matured more. Don't spend time every month dealing with a high touch owner. That house would have to be an ultra premium rent house and getting an ultra premium management fee from my perspective, $5,000 a month and getting, I don't know, 10 or 12% a month in management fee
With a five
to
star
put
with
up
a
with it.
5-star tenant who never bothers you.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. So, sure,
Yeah.
I'll handle that all day long. So, you don't want to spend time, if you find yourself spending time every month dealing with one particular house or owner and it's negatively, then you really need to step back and look and see if you really want to even keep that house.
Yeah, and I think you're getting at the point that's just been brought up in chat here by Tal and a few others, which is, you can charge fees to make it worth it. Well, put it pretty much every difficult owner, you can put a number on what it would take for you to be able to deal with them, right? And
Absolutely.
so
Yep.
put a number on it and charge the fee, and they'll either self-select out or stomach the fee so that they don't have to leave. Because that's the problem with bad owners sometimes is that they're very mean and they treat you poorly, but then when you try to fire them, they beg you not to, and they ask to stay, and they say that they'll do better next time. And it's like, well, you can pay for the pleasure to do
That's
that.
right.
If you want to do that. Okay. End the poll, share the poll. Which feels more true for your business today? About half of you said a mix of both. A little less than a third said profit growth, mostly coming through adding new doors, and just a handful of folks saying, our retention strategies is what is driving our profitability right now. So that's about how I thought that would come down. Is that retention is really important, but it's not necessarily driving profitability for a lot of businesses at the moment. Okay, we'll just spend a couple minutes on this one because I want to make sure we get to our third segment. So how can operators distinguish between natural churn and churn caused by operational breakdown? Do you guys all segment your churn? Do you have conversations about when an owner leaves? Was this us? Was this them? Was this market? Was this timing? How do you approach segmenting out churn? I'll start with you, Steve, on this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we definitely track, good, bad, neutral churn. I think, again, like I mentioned kind of in the opener, reducing bad churn is kind of the name of the game. I usually only have conversations with my team if the reason the person's leaving is not neutral churn. And quite honestly, usually I have a conversation with the team member and the owner if they are thinking of leaving for a bad reason, which is basically going to another company or taking it over themselves or something like that. Because, kind of like the last conversation, sometimes it's just the owner is not good. And it's like, no matter what you do, you're not going to satisfy them. But sometimes you do screw things up and you want to see, is this a situation where, it's just like an edge case that our system still works and just for whatever reason, something slips through the cracks and we'll just kind of keep rolling? Or is there some like glaring issue in the way we do things that we need to correct so this doesn't keep happening? So that's a good, it's a good time to kind of evaluate that. But yeah, I personally think stressing about neutral churn is just a waste of time. There's nothing you can do about it. If you look at things like just the long-term horizon, we've had a lot of people that naturally or neutrally left that came back. And I think if we were kind of like salesy to try to get them to stay when they were trying to leave, that wouldn't have happened. If someone's moving back in, they got a kid moving in, they're selling the property, whatever it is, like that's just what they want to do. Life happens. There's nothing you did wrong. It's just, and usually they'll even tell you like, hey, we're so sorry. You guys are great, but I'm moving back to whatever. And so here's what we're doing. So yeah, we definitely do track the difference between those things and kind of go about evaluating them in different ways.
For sure. Yeah, it's good. Robert, how about you? How do you guys distinguish between natural churn that just, or you could call it neutral churn, like just the flow of the market, and then, your operational breakdown based bad churn?
Sure. I would consider bad churn if an owner is switching PM companies, right? And I'm going to call them and ask them. I'm not going to try to talk them out of it because they've already made their decision at that point, right? I'm going to ask them, hey, could you give me some feedback on why you decided to switch companies so I can take that back to the team and we can try to work on that and improve it for our other owner clients. Some will talk to you, some won't. Usually they will, especially if you're not sitting there trying to beg them to stay. Um, so that's really when we reach out to them. To me, that's bad churn. Everything else, I almost would consider neutral, right? Are they selling the home? Are they moving back into it? Is a kid moving into it or family member? You're not going to change their mind. And one of the things that I've noticed lately is some of the accidental landlords, they're coming up on that, especially if they lived in it 3 out of 5 year mark, for tax reasons. So they're starting to sell their homes. And there's nothing you can do to convince them otherwise, other than try to get the listing if you do sales, right? Because if they live, for those who don't know, if you lived in it 2 out of the last 5 years, you don't have to pay capital gains up to a certain amount, whether you're single or married. I forget what the latest numbers are. So they're going to sell those homes and take advantage of those profits without having to pay capital gains. That's totally neutral. It's just the way of life. You didn't do anything wrong or bad or mess anything up. Don't spend a lot of time on it. Just help facilitate getting the house back to the owner. And hopefully, ask them, feel free to ask them for a 5-star review. Hey, like, I know you're selling, it's great. Would you mind leaving us a 5-star review if you haven't? And most of them will. And that goes a long way.
Yeah. Yeah. Get a nice review on the way out.
Yep.
Which you may not get if you spend so much time trying to convince them not to leave when they've
Right.
already made up. A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still.
Yep.
And that usually turns into a bad situation, a bad owner. Okay, Jared, I'm going to start with you on the next set of questions. Want to move through so that we can get to some of the operational levers here. But first, want to offer you guys the opportunity, if you want help creating or refining a plan to minimize churn and maximize the stability and the value of your portfolio, we would love to be able to help you with that. That is one of the things that we do here at Profit Coach, help you make sure that your churn is under control, in a healthy place, or if you don't know what it is, help you figure out what it is. So what we'll do in that call, which if you want to book that call, you can use this QR code right here with your phone. That'll bring up Terrence's calendar, or you can mark your interest here on the poll. But we'll help you understand where churn might be impacting your profitability and your growth stability. Really put some numbers behind this. Uncover opportunities to improve your retention and your client lifetime value, or again, actually measure those things for the first time if you haven't done so. And then take some practical next steps to build a portfolio that compounds profitability over time, isn't relentlessly being taxed by your churn. And churn can be something that prevents you. It can be the single factor that is preventing you from actually being a profitable company. And so we want to make sure that you have your sights set on profitability in a realistic way. So you can book a call through the QR code. You can select yes. And then if you're going to broker owner and you want to set up a meeting on site, that would be awesome. Our whole team will be there. So that third option right there is for you to select that if you want to meet with us at broker owner. Okay. Moving on to our third section here. What operational decisions increase long-term client retention? Jared, I'll start with you on this. What moments in the client life cycle tend to determine whether an owner stays for the long run? So what are you looking for in sales or in onboarding or in the relationship that is telling you this is going to be a good long-term client, or this blinking yellow light, future churn alert here? You're on mute, but you're probably about to say
sorry.
something.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, I think it comes from kind of knowing your client, and that's going to be different with different clients. I mean, the first question is this an accidental landlord, or is this or a more institutional investor, or somebody just getting started with investing? And that's probably going to gear how you set those expectations and how you kind of coach them and get them ready to go as you onboard them, and then as you begin managing the property. Accidental landlords are probably going to have they're going to be less apt to stay 5+ years. I have had it happen, particularly coming off of the downturn of the Great Recession. But knowing that up front means that you're going to approach the whole relationship differently. When you're talking about somebody looking for a true partner or a true manager to help them run their business, so to speak, I think it's not so much any set particular moment in the client life cycle more as it is consistency over time and doing the little things right over and over and over again. And that just kind of maintains that relationship. And, we have several clients who have been with us for a long time. And for me, the number one thing that I hear people come to us looking to switch to us from another management company is lack of communication, or, they notice things start to slip. I mean, if someone's been with you a long time, they'll give you a little bit of grace, particularly if you're communicating. But when they start seeing the little things go wrong over and over and over again, after a 6 month or a 12 month or an 18th month window, that's when they're really going to start to look. So it's, to me, not necessarily know your client, and just over time build that relationship with consistency and communication.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Steve or Robert, I'll open it up to you guys. What are the moments in the client life cycle where you are able to sniff this out?
Yeah, I think Peter Lohman had some stuff on this at some point about like the times during the life cycle that churn is most likely, and it was during the listing, like when you're first basically leasing, marketing the property for lease, and then at renewal. So obviously, when you first onboard a client, like keeping that first good impression going, I think is huge to basically not lose the client. When you release it, also very big. And then renewal, I think for us, renewal is great for the natural churn that you can turn into good churn. If you do sales like we do, you have this huge advantage of landing that listing because when the lease is coming up and you already have a relationship with the client. So you can position yourself, if you're already providing good service, to basically be like, hey, your lease is coming up. I see, to your point, you've lived in the house the last 5 years. Maybe you can save a bunch of money in capital gains taxes. Are you aware of that? A lot of owners don't even know about that. So when you tell them about it, they're like, oh, wow, this guy really knows what he's doing. So it's a good way to convert the churn that probably will happen anyway into good churn. But then also, like Jared and Robert were saying, communication, that's by far the number one thing. When we get clients from other companies, communication by far is the number one thing they always complain about the old company. So doing a good job of communicating obviously helps keep it. One thing we do also that I think has reduced our churn is we have our property manager effectively act as the BDM for properties that they're going to bring on. So we do it geographically. So basically, if someone calls in, we find out where their property is and route it to the manager that handle that property. And so pretty much right from the moment they call in, they're talking to the person that they're going to be dealing with, which is great on a number of fronts. You can already establish a relationship. You can establish the way that relationship works and make sure it's good for both people. We have some managers like to text a lot. We have some managers that don't text at all. So it's like if they can kind of sync up with the owner how to communicate, the frequency, the response rate, all that sort of stuff, it's kind of hard to lose them because they know what it's like going into it. So as long as that manager maintains that same level of service, it's kind of hard to lose them unless something naturally happens. So yeah, I think, like I said, those two, the renewal and the leasing part, are the two kind of triggers. But big picture, I think it's just the communication, providing good service.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. So I'm curious about that. So as a renewal comes up, are you kind of putting the options before them? Here's what we think you could get on renewal. And then, hey, here's a CMA. Here's your basis that you bought this house for. Here's your, we're not CPAs, but here's some tax implications. Like, what seems good to you? What opportunity makes the most sense for you? Is there something like that you do?
Yeah, exactly. So in our Monday platform, which is what we run everything through, basically renewals hit the board about 150 days out. And we include data on every client in terms of when they bought the property, how much they paid for it, if they ever lived in it, if they did live in it, when they moved out of it. We just have that data there. And so, yeah, what we'll do, we have a little part of our email where we run comps, and then the comps. And if it's up to the manager's discretion, if they think that client would benefit from selling, and there would be some reason to sell, or just that they may want to know what the property's worth, they'll send over rental comps and they'll send over sales comps. Like, hey, tenant's been great. This is what you're getting. Market rate is this. You might want to renew. Oh, and by the way, if you've thought about selling, the property should sell between this and that, and we can handle the sale if you want to. Yada yada yada.
Yeah, that's great. That's super smart. Robert, how about you? What moments tend to determine for you whether an owner stays or doesn't?
Yeah, it goes back to the beginning when you're onboarding them. So setting expectations clearly to them about the property. Don't just say what they want to hear in order to sign up the client because that'll come back to bite you. And part of that is, we run a rental analysis based on what we think the property will rent for, and that's based on real data, not feelings or emotions or what they think it should get for. So if you're clear about that and you do proper research and then you quickly rent the house within that range, it makes you look like you know what you're talking about, right? And then if you're able to consistently get renewals, that's important as well because that tells the owner that, hey, they're taking care of the house, it's being maintained well, the tenants are happy, we're not dealing with vacancy time. And once you can get a tenant to renew for 2 or 3 years, in all likelihood, they're going to stay longer because they're settled, they're established in that house. Moving gets expensive, they've accumulated a bunch of stuff. So you have a really high likelihood of ending up with a 5 or 6 or 7 year tenant unless they decide to go buy a house all of a sudden or get transferred like that. So it all goes back to the beginning and setting clear expectations with the owner based on how a house should be professionally managed and then following through on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Well, we're hitting time here, so I will ask this last question, lightning round, starting with Jared and moving over. If you could only improve one operational area to reduce churn, where would you focus first? What would you do? 10 seconds or less.
Oh, just probably market harder, go out and expand a geographical area where we're getting doors for us. That would be our answer, and we're close to doing that. Other than that, just keep doing what we're doing, communicate well, be accountable, and stay in touch with the clients in the right way.
Yeah, it's good. Steve, how about you?
Reduce maintenance expenses.
Great answer. Robert.
Yeah, that is a great answer. I would say keep doing what we're doing, but also as we look at expanding maybe out in some geographic areas, but I'd like to also increase our number of doors coming in per month. So we're looking at some strategies around that, or maybe increasing the budget for that, because if we can maintain an under 10% churn rate and add doors, then we can get some really stronger growth for the company than we're already seeing.
Yeah, that's good. My answer would be in a world of endless AI and automation, pick up your phone, call the owner, see how they're doing. How are you? What's your plan for are you happy with our service? Ask the question, the hard question. Are you happy with our service? What are your plans for the home? What can I help with? Just see how they're doing. And I think you get ahead of some potential issues that way. And I think personally, I think that every owner should be called every winter. So they don't necessarily want to be bothered over the summer. You've got a million things going on. Your PMs, your operators, they have a little bit more time over the fall or winter. Great time to pick up the phone, do some high touch customer service. It really does cut through the noise when most everything else is being automated and AI is in everyone's face. Just talk to a human. Goes a long way. Okay, we're going to wrap up. I will see you at Broker Owner. Hopefully you will be there speaking twice, which is very exciting, doing a breakout session on Tuesday. Very first breakout session right after the opening keynote. You can come visit our booth. We will have espressos and lattes. We'll be doing our thing as always. And then Peter Lohman and Wolf and myself are presenting on something pretty special Thursday morning, so you won't want to miss that. Thank you guys for coming to the Profit Power Hour. Looking forward to do it again in May. Thank you to our three panelists. You gentlemen did a great job, and we will see you next month.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, y'all.
See you next week, Brad.
See you later.
See you guys.